In the last video, I mentioned that this container is going to decide when and where to show each micro frontend. So that really implies that the container needs to get access to the source code of the products list in the cart at some point in time. So in this video, we're going to focus on the different ways of implementing that. We're going to focus on the different ways of making sure the container gets access to products list and cart. This entire process is referred to as integration. So whenever you hear the term integration, you need to think about how we're going to kind of assemble together or orchestrate our different micro front ends. Now, before we talk about any different method of integration, I want you to know that there are many different solutions or many different ways of putting integration together. But out of all these different possible solutions, none of them is perfect. They all have their upsides and their downsides. So deciding on one to use is really going to come down to what your requirements are for your application. Now, in general, there are three different categories of integration. We have build time integration, which is also known as compile time. We have runtime, which is also known as client side, and server. We're not going to focus too much on server because it requires a ton of backend code that we're not really going to get into inside this course. So we're going to focus a lot more on build time and runtime integration. Whenever we hear about build time integration, we are saying that we are going to make sure that our container gets access to the products list source code before the container is loaded in the browser. With runtime integration, we are saying that the container is going to get access to the products list and the cart source code after the container is loaded in the browser. So a very small distinction there, but it turns out that that distinction is rather important. So let's take a look first at an example of build time integration. So this is one way of implementing build time integration. It is definitely not the only way. There are other methods of implementing build time integration, but this is a pretty straightforward way of understanding it. So with a build time integration approach, we might have one team that is in charge of developing the products list application. At some point in time, they're going to finish up their project and they're going to say, okay, time to deploy this thing. At that point in time, the products list team would publish products list as an NPM package. So they would take all the source code for it and publish it off to NPM and make it available as a package that could be installed into another project. Then the team in charge of container would install products list as a dependency using that same kind of npm install command that you are probably already very familiar with. The container team would then build up their application, and the result of that would be a bundle that has all the source code for container and all the source code for products list. So that bundle right there implies that we have one JavaScript file, or possibly multiple, that has all the source code for products list and container put together. Now, there's some definite upsides and downsides to this approach. The first big pro is that it's really easy to set up this flow, and it's relatively easy to understand as well. You've probably already implemented a flow very much like this without even really realizing it if you've ever installed some kind of third-party component into one of your applications. So if you install a third-party component, you have taken use or you've made use of some package that's been published by another team of engineers, and you made use of it inside of your project. The downside to this approach is that anytime the products list application needs to be redeployed, we would have to redeploy the container as well. The other big downside here is that because the container has full and direct access to all the products list source code, it might be a little bit tempting to somehow tightly couple those two projects together, which is something that we don't really want to do in a micro front-end architecture. Okay, so that's an example of a build time integration. Let's take a pause right here and then take a look at runtime integration as well in the next video.